There is probably no politician in America whose breathtaking ego, disgustingly transparent pandering, and catastrophic policy positions make them more of a threat to the future than Ted Cruz, the junior senator from Texas. Cruz is in the news this week for calling Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell a liar on the Senate floor. That kind of personal political sniping grabbed all the headlines this weekend, but as usual, the major media missed the bigger Cruz story, reported this weekend by my friend Zaid Jilani. Cruz just got a record-breaking $15 million donation to his super PAC from fracking industry billionaires. And why shouldn't he? Climate Progress just named him the most extreme presidential candidate on climate change denial, and his policy proposals would essentially set off the carbon bomb. This is going to be the first in a weekly regular series on the villains of the story of climate change and what we can do to stop them. Now, before I really get into Cruz, I want to tell you about this gigantic political donation and the people behind it. Ferris and Dan Wilkes made their fortune in 2011 by selling off their company, FracTech, which designs, makes, and sets up pumper rigs used to frack shale formations. The company has a gross history of labor and safety blights on its record, including the death of an employee in 2005, in which FracTech was found to be lax about employee safety, and they were fined a whopping $3,500, which was later reduced to $1,750, or roughly the Pottery Barn price for chairs like the one Dan is lounging on in this photo. They've also been the targets of lawsuits on the parts of employees who allege they were wrongly classified as salaried employees so FracTech could deny them overtime. This is, in addition to endangering local water supplies through fracking in a pretty dry part of Texas, and making money off the general destruction of the future for the human race, but hey, who's keeping score, right? Each brother is worth about $1.5 billion right now, and they're real stand-up guys too, let me tell you. They fund homophobic and xenophobic groups that hate gays and Muslims, and generally they fund the right wing's ugly side.
They're being taught the other ideas, the gay agenda every day out in the world. So we have to stand up and explain to them that that's not real, and that's not proper, it's not right.
They're able to throw this kind of money at supporting Ted Cruz's political ambitions because of a little-known Supreme Court case called Citizens United, in which the court told the ultra-rich corporations and unions that they could spend as much as they want to convince people to vote for or against a candidate, including spending on ads and other campaign materials and tools, on the laughable assumption that because a candidate's campaign didn't control the super PAC, it couldn't create corruption or the appearance of corruption to dump money on it. Because, when someone hears that a fracking magnate, say, gave $15 million to put you in office, it couldn't possibly affect your opinion about the legislation that would make those donors rich or anything like that, right? So what exactly are these polluting, anti-labor, anti-reason billionaires from the big country in Texas hoping to buy for their $15 million? Well, that's pretty simple. They want a president of the United States who shares their warped vision for the future, and that future includes corporations like theirs being able to dig up carbon and pump it into the atmosphere for cash. And that's exactly what they'd get with Ted Cruz. Cruz is the worst kind of fossil fuel industry toady in the Senate, and he's easily the slickest. On one hand, he tries to portray himself as the son of scientists and mathematicians who oppose climate change legislation on intellectual grounds.
Now, my view on this and everything else is that we should follow the evidence and the science and the data. I'm the chairman of the Science and Space Committee of the Senate Commerce Committee. And I'm also the child of two mathematicians. Both my parents are mathematicians. My dad was a geophysicist for many, many years. And the problem with this debate is it is driven principally by people with partisan agendas in Washington that are disconnected from the science and the data.
While at the same time using his perch in the Senate to try to stop NASA from doing actual climate change research.
We can see from 2009 to 2016 that Earth Sciences has had a 41% increase in the budget. In my judgment, this does not represent a fair or appropriate allocation of resources.
Now, if the science was going to show that you were right, Why worry, Mr. Cruz? Last year, when Texas, Mr. Cruz's home state, was drowning in climate change-influenced flooding, an influence that was verified by Texas' own climatologist, Cruz pulled out the sleaze usually heard from NRA types, babbling about how we shouldn't politicize a natural disaster. He supported the Keystone Pipeline.
Every argument, whether it is jobs, whether it is national security, whether it is revenue or the environment, every argument supports approving this pipeline.
Rollbacks on EPA regulations and efforts to weaken the federal government's ability to regulate the fossil fuel industry. So he's basically a caricature of a public servant, doing anything possible for his polluter patrons and leaving the actual public to choke on it. Cruz could not be more insufferable and self-deluded in his denialism either. He gave listeners with a brain intellectual whiplash by claiming that people who believe what credible scientific research and consensus on climate change tell us are flat earthers. Cruz compared brave people like himself, people who are super brave enough to do what their billionaire donors want, to Galileo. Galileo, the guy who stood up to reactionary religious troglodytes on behalf of reason, that guy. Sometimes Cruz's ego is so breathtaking that I can't tell if he's serious or trolling the good citizens of the United States. So here's the punchline. Cruz is sitting right at the middle of the pack among the 15 or so people running for the Republican presidential nomination right now. But, thanks to Citizens United and other recent Supreme Court cases, the ability of very rich people like Ferris and Dan Wilkes and other fossil fuel fortune families to essentially buy an election cannot be overstated. This is one area where the movement to end climate change has to link up with other movements. Because if we don't get money out of politics, or find effective ways to counter its influence with people power, or some combination of the two, we will lose the fight to save the future on this planet. Okay, so this has been kind of a long video, so I appreciate you hanging with me. I'll close just by directing you to a couple of places where you can learn more. You can read my friend Zaid Jilani's article on Alternet, and you can find the link for that in the description of the video below. You can learn about why Cruz was named the most extreme candidate on climate change denial at Climate Progress, and that's also included in the description. And in the description, I've also included links to exciting campaigns that will tell you how to get money out of politics. And finally, as always, please subscribe to this channel so you can stay up to date on the latest climate news and the best way to respond. Peace.